Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 18th of October 2024. The year is rolling on, events are rolling on with it. It's been a busy week at home. It's been a busy week internationally. We've 3 weeks until the American presidential election. We've probably about the same amount of time to an Irish general election. Events are taking place in the Middle East that are quite significant as we're recording this. And there's lots of other news happening in the world as well. So, Sarah, I'll start by saying hello and ask you how you are.
Hello, I'm good. God, that American election feels like it's been coming for about 10 years, does it? Or is that just me?
I know. I can't wait till it's over.
I know. I
know
cannot wait.
The people out there who won't know what to do with themselves when it's over because it's all they've been thinking about for a long time. But yeah, it's endless. We're going to talk about that, by the way. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris later on, Sarah, because before we came on air, we were doing our list of things we wanted to talk about. We forgot to say we'd talk about Kamala Harris. But before we talk about Kamala Harris, I want to start what matters closer to home, because it was big news this week, Sarah, from Cork and Galway. Did you hear it?
What? Break it to me. Big news. Go on.
Galway City Council passed a motion this week formally banning Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, from Galway City or its environs. Cork City Council did the same thing on Monday. So Benjamin Netanyahu has now been banned formally from Cork and Galway. Councillor Frank Fahy in Galway, who's a Fine Gael councillor, proposed a motion to the council to amend the ban on Bibi Netanyahu to also include Vladimir Putin. So there would have been two of them in it. But Galway City Council, in its wisdom, Sarah, decided that no, they wouldn't ban Putin at this point. He's still welcome in Galway, but Prime Minister Netanyahu, he's not wanted. So that's I think big news. What's your reaction to
it? I'm sure. I'm sure Bibi is a huge fan of the Galway races, so I'm sure this will come as a massive hole in his social calendar for the next year. And as for Vladimir Putin, this is just, come on. I think that people deserve better than their councils doing this kind of garbage. And it's a kind of an age-old tradition in Irish politics a lot. Dublin City Council do it a lot as well, where they do these kind of nonsensical things that actually, calling for this and condemning that and whatever. Fix roads, help out local businesses, sort out housing lists, do real stuff, please. I don't think, I think the Senate, it can be a good place for people to talk about things that aren't necessarily on a legislative agenda or aren't necessarily, on any agenda. Fine. But local government is actually, and I think that part of the thing, the reason, particularly in Dublin, I think part of the ways that people lose out is because when they're voting, they don't take local government seriously enough, and they don't think enough about, like my father always used to describe the council as, the grandfathers of the city, and that, you think about the city, so let's say Dublin or Galway or whatever, you think about the city like in its entirety and how it will work and how it will work best for people living there and whatever. This isn't for that. And this is just, we live in a world addicted to virtue signaling, and this is more of that. And I don't think it's a good use of time. I don't think it's a good use of energy. And I think that there's a massive cost, and this is kind of boring, but it's true, that there's a massive cost to the taxpayer to get that many people into a room at the same time with all of the administrative functions that go around it. And for you to waste time talking about this nonsense that will never be heard by anybody, and Benjamin Netanyahu, I'm sorry to break it to you, hon, doesn't care, is a waste of time and money and effort for a country that most city councils would be well advised to be spending their energy elsewhere.
Well, lest people think, because I know there are people who watch this podcast who think that we're only raising this issue because you and I are Zionist shills. Yeah. I'm a little bit of a Zionist shill, but it wasn't only Benjamin Netanyahu. No. It was also, I was watching, Dublin City Council had a special meeting earlier on this week on Monday night, because Monday night, first Monday of the month, oftentimes is when councils meet. And Dublin City Council had a special meeting on disinformation. Now, honest to God, I sat through most of it and I lost the will to live. But my favourite bit, Sarah, was Green Party councillor Janet Horner suggested that Dublin City Council should get off Twitter. So Dublin City Council, not the councillors, not the individual councillors, the actual institution of the council, should delete its Twitter account in protest at Elon Musk being a bad article altogether. I mean, I just think, you are paid. You're not paid a massive salary, but you're paid by the taxpayers to sit there. And we've Cork and Galway banning Benjamin Netanyahu and Dublin City Council debating deleting its Twitter account to get back at Elon Musk. And like, it just feels to me like I'm living in a bloody student union.
But also, imagine you're the owner, or you probably are, I don't know. I certainly have been a customer or an owner of Shanahan's on the Green or Dillinger's in Ranelagh or one of the other multiple restaurants that are closing down in the Dublin City Council area because of rising costs. And I know that those costs aren't entirely within the remit of Dublin City Council, but rates are, and other things are. And like, maybe your time would be better spent talking about that. Do you know what I mean?
I have to say, just on that, I saw Tom Durley, the Daily Mail's incredibly annoying and pompous food critic.
Yeah, I saw
during
that.
the
That
week.
was really mean-spirited.
Did you see what he said? Yeah, Shanahan's
Yeah.
on the Green has announced that it's closing down, and Tom Durley was like, "Oh, what a I'm not going to say what he said because I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was something mean-spirited and mean, which was basically it's overrated.
Yeah.
And it may well be. Look, steak isn't everyone's cup of tea. I loved Shannon's on the Green. I only ate there maybe 5 or 6 times in my life, but Sarah, their string onions were just a wonderful.
I know.
You literally eat a basket of their string onions on. So.
I know, but loads.
You're right.
It was also it was very expensive, right? But it was also a place that lots of people, myself included, I'm the same as you. I'd say I've been there maybe 4 or 5 times. I went there the night of my 40th. Like, it's a place that people would go to because it was expensive for the odd special occasion. It has memories. Mm-hmm. It's kind of on the Green, and then, but also equally, and you're not living in Dublin, but Dillinger's and Ranelagh at a certain point, and I know my sister and her friends, there was a whole scene of people who'd go to Dillinger's and Ranelagh that apparently, I think I was there once, did brunches on Sundays and people go there for their breakfast. Like, you know, like these things become a kind of a heart of communities and they matter to people. And it's just like restaurants, the restaurant business is notoriously difficult to survive and all of that. But there's just so many restaurants closing up shop at the moment that it can't be just that. There has to be more to it. And I think that it is a bit offensive to those kind of people and people who are upset or distressed by losing their business for you to be talking about things that aren't even, you know, in this country, or Twitter, Elon Musk. Like, get a grip.
Look, it was a disgrace. That city council meeting was a disgrace. It was a Fine Gael councillor. And I can't remember which one it was. Generic Fine Gael councillor. I only know that it wasn't James Gagan because he's the mayor and he called on the generic Fine Gael councillor to give this speech about misinformation. And the councillor, he started off making a reasonably good point. He started off by saying, you know, obviously there's a lot of concern about immigration in the city. And what we need to do is to make sure the councillors are informed so that if people are saying this building is going to be an asylum centre, we can tell them whether that's true or accurate, and that might build up confidence. A good point. Okay. But then he actually said, and it's up to the council to give us more information. Mate, you are the council. Like, the whole meeting was kind of constructed in this way as if the council was entirely separate from the corporate body that is the council, and that they were just really there to have a bit of a chat about Elon Musk and Bibi Netanyahu.
Is that not the same way as the Dáil works as well, John? I mean, we're heading into election cycles and my social media is now full of government TDs calling for this and calling for that. As I've said before in the podcast, just ring them. You're in government. Just ring them. Like, you could just ask, you're the government. You're it. It's you. It's like the only thing I can liken it to is that you're you work in the emergency department in Beaumont Hospital and somebody comes in having a heart attack and you're the doctor and you start screaming, somebody call a doctor. You're the doctor. You're the doctor.
Yeah. Well, regular listeners will know that a couple of weeks ago I ran a Fine Gael canvasser off my door, and I still feel bad about that, but I feel less bad about it every passing day when I see stuff like this.
I had one the other day, didn't I tell you? And they said the same thing.
You did? Oh, yes. Tell the people the story.
I had a canvasser from Fine Gael knock on the door, and I just said, I'm just going to list a few things. I was very nice. I was nicer than you. And I said, I'm just going to list a few
Wouldn't
things.
be hard.
And, and I said, Children's Hospital, bike hut, etc., etc. And he said exactly what your canvasser said. He said, that's the civil service. That's not Fine Gael. And I said, would you go way out of that now? I said, that's not going to wash here. And it wasn't actually the candidate themselves; it was a canvasser for the candidate. And I said, I'm not going to vote for him until he comes up here and is able to tell me what a woman is. So that was really the end of that conversation.
Well, in fairness, I didn't have the candidate either. The candidate in Tipperary North is Councillor Phil Bugler. She was not on my doorstep in person. Can't imagine that she will be. But
not after that
it was a
performance.
I'd
say your register is marked with a big red X beside you.
They probably, the Fine Gaelers, they probably put me down as that lad must be a Fianna Fáiler, because that's the way they think. So, but like, to me, and what I said to him, and part of what I said to him quite loudly was like, the reason we elect you is to run the civil service. Don't stand on my door. I think I literally said, don't stand on my effing doorstep and tell me that the civil service did something to you. You're supposed to do stuff with the civil service.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to get angry in front of the people on the podcast because they all think I'm nice and mild-mannered when sometimes I'm not. So anyway, there's going to be a general election, it looks like. What do you think? Is Micheál Martin changing his position?
Seems like he's softening up a bit, doesn't it? I mean, it was all no, and he gave a couple of breakfast briefings. I can't remember what he was speaking at a couple of weeks ago, where he said, that this was unhelpful and wasting time, and their job was governing until the end, and blah blah blah. And now he's saying, oh well, if a couple of pieces of legislation were passed, it would, it might make sense pretty much to go to the people before Christmas. So that definitely seems to be a softening up. But like, politicians be politicking, and that's fine. But you'd have to be an idiot not to be considering very strongly going to the country at a time where your main political opponent in that election, Sinn Fein, is not just on the ropes, is like down the street in the pub on the ground. Like, and you can say all you like that you don't want to give them time to recover. I think they need years to recover. So I don't think it's even about that. But I think if you just snap the election and get it done, I think that you're, particularly Fine Gael, I really feel strongly, and people can be annoyed at me for saying this, and I it's not that this isn't, just to be clear, I'm not saying what I want to happen, I'm saying what I think.
I think we've both made clear that what we said to Fine Gael canvassers, so I don't think we can be mistaken for likely Fine Gael voters.
But I think Fine Gael are going to have an excellent day. And I think they're going to have a better day if they call an election faster, because I think social welfare payments, all of the children's allowance and all those things will be coming out in November and December, lead up to Christmas. Weather's not too bad yet, weather's not too depressing. Sinn Fein are an absolute, not even crisis, like meltdown, full meltdown. And there seems to be a little bit of a lull when it comes to the constant news cycle about the immigration, the centres and stuff. I just think it's a moment to call an election if you're politically strategizing, and people like Micheál can talk about how, our job is governing or whatever. Yeah, but you're a politician as well, and you know when the time to go is, and it feels very much like the time to go now.
So I had a conversation during the week with a member of the government. We will say that much, nothing more, because I want to identify the person, but a member of the government. And the member of the government said to me, I was basically saying what you were saying, why haven't you called the election? And his answer was that they were afraid of what they called Theresa May problem. So people, and this is real political nerd stuff now, you have to remember a couple of years back in British political history, let alone Irish political history, but Theresa May in 2017 called a snap election because the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn were in an awful mess. She was riding high in the polls. She thought, I can get a good majority now and push through my Brexit deal. You might remember that. If you don't, you might remember it after I said it. And it backfired on her. People are like, oh, why are we having another election? I don't want an election. Why is she calling an election? It looks opportunistic. And she lost her majority and Jeremy Corbyn very nearly became Prime Minister. And apparently there's some fear in government circles that might happen here, but that's absurd because we're actually due to have a general election in a couple of months anyway.
Yeah.
So it shows you some. Look, maybe the person I was talking to was speculating himself, and it wasn't Simon Harris, so he clearly doesn't know Simon Harris's mind. But that was that person's thinking as to why they weren't having the election. But I think it's patently obvious now at this stage that they've talked themselves into it and it's going to be called. By the time you see us, if you're watching us this week, my prediction is that by the time you see us again next week, we'll be talking about the general election campaign. That's my prediction for what it's worth.
Yeah. I don't think that, we were talking about this earlier on the phone. I don't think there's, a lot or any space for Sinn Fein. I mean, the Sinn Fein crisis, we'll call it, is actually still ongoing. It's not even like it's past and they're starting to regroup and you don't want to give them time to regroup. It's still live. It's still a real thing. I mean, how many TDs have they lost now? Four, is it?
Can I just say, every time you talk about Sinn Féin, there's somebody there who accuses you of shinner bashing and says they're an easy target and blah, blah, blah. And you're not as hard in Fine Gael, not as hard as Fianna Fáil. I mean, first of all, bear in mind what we've just been talking about Fine Gael. We both, Sarah and I, have had engagements that were not altogether warm with Fine Gael canvassers in recent weeks. So this is not shinner bashing.
And also, I'd just like to add that I have been criticised, and I won't say who, but people who listen to this podcast who are in Labour, and you know who you are, saying stop being so mean to Labour all the time and criticising that I'm the meanest of all mean to Labour, and I'm meaner to Labour than I am to anyone else. So that may be true, because I think that, well, I won't say, but
well, I kind of, to be honest with you,
it's not a Sinn Fein for Sinn Féin's sake thing, is what I'm trying to say.
If I've let anybody be meaner to the Labour Party than I am, then I haven't been doing my job. Anyway, the point that I'm making is I don't know how anyone could have watched that farcical performance by Mary Lou McDonald in the Dáil the other day and come away thinking anything other than this is a party that is in an absolute mess. I mean, the thing for me is the thing that basically didn't get any commentary, which was this chap, Niall O'Dongala, Sinn Féin senator, Sinn Féin leader in the Seanad, is texting a 17-year-old boy. The guy admits to it, and the Shinners sit him down and say, you have to leave Sinn Féin and you have to resign. And clearly they said to him, you have to resign your Seanad seat, which he did. And then they put out a press statement saying he's the greatest thing since sliced bread and we wish him well. All very well. But then Mary Lou stands up in the Dáil and says, well, we did all that because we were concerned about his mental health. We didn't want to expose Niall O'Dongala because it might be damaging to his mental health. But why are you doing it now then?
But also, I'm not going to go over old ground or name somebody because I think that they're long gone from politics and it's not really fair. But there was a situation with a Dublin TD a few years ago who was sending inappropriate messages on Facebook or text to a girl. Do you remember?
I do. I know exactly who you're talking about.
And
in case, look, it's not that we're not going to name people. That wouldn't be fair because I don't want to open the algorithm. But in case people think we're covering it up, it was the Labour TD from Dublin West.
Yeah, I just don't think it's useful to name him. Like whatever, I can't, and also I can't fully remember his name. It was convenient, but anyway, anybody can look it up. It caused a by-election in that constituency, which was nearly won by Fianna Fáil. I can't remember who won it. Sinn Féin, was it? Anyway, the point is that nobody rightfully cared about his mental health at the time because that's not really the point. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you could say, well, we're worried about, I mean, anybody who's been doing something like that and is now caught and is facing losing their job, I would suggest their mental health probably isn't in top shape, would you? Mm-hmm. So no. I think that's a
we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
But it's also in the context of multiple other situations where Sinn Féin seem to be doing their own governing and deciding what way to deal with things that aren't appropriate and not being truthful with the public or the Dáil about what the circumstances surrounding these people leaving or staying or whatever is.
The Brian Stanley incident is obviously another one where, I mean, it's just a mess. I mean, first of all, they have not made public what the nature of the complaint is. And it's not for you or I to make public what the nature of the complaint is, but I think there's a wide awareness in political circles that of what the complaint is, but they haven't made that public. Yeah. He has made a counter complaint. For the avoidance of doubt, my understanding of this situation is that the only matter that's potentially criminal is his counter complaint. He's the one alleging that something criminal may have happened. There's no criminal accusation been made against him. That's my understanding. And yet they fumbled this so badly that they have managed to cast into the ether one of their most high-profile and successful TDs on the eve of a general election. It is baffling to me. And they, if this is serious enough, if it's serious enough to warrant his immediate suspension and him not being a candidate, when they received that complaint, why wasn't he immediately suspended from Sinn Féin membership? Because the first we all heard about this last week was when he resigned. So
Yeah.
basically, we're being told that there was a serious complaint made against this person, and we continue to allow him to remain in political office as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee. That's bizarre, Sarah. Like, why wouldn't they? Why, like, if the government had done this, say it was a minister, say that the Taoiseach was made aware that AN minister, a male minister, had an accusation made against them, and he said, "Oh well, we'll quietly investigate it internally, but in the meantime, you can remain in office," and that came out, it'd be a national scandal. And yet, it's a point that hardly anybody has picked or raised up on. Anyway. Do you know, I use a particular family member as kind of a what you call a weather vane on this stuff.
Yeah, I have a few people like that.
And that person was just saying, I was saying, the general impression was Sinn Fein just in a mess. They're just in a mess, aren't they? They're done for. And if that is reflective of general public opinion, then this election could get very ugly for them very quickly.
Well, yeah, I think that it's going to get ugly really quickly. I think it was getting ugly. I think they were in a free fall or like a kind of a big, difficult situation anyway. Now, I think that, and we've discussed this before, that I think that the base of their vote is probably 8 to 10%, no matter what happens. But with stuff regarding this kind of thing, that 10% might, drop another point or two. They could have a terrible outing. I think I could see Mary Lou resigning outside a county centre in Dublin.
Here's a completely left field question. Is her own seat safe? Mary Lou McDonald obviously represents the constituency of Dublin Central. Pascal Donoghue will be running there for Fine Gael. Fianna Fáil will be making a charge for a seat. Labour traditionally strong. Also likely to be if there's a strong anti-immigration vote for kind of candidates like Malachy Steenson, Gavin Pepper, it's going to be in that kind of constituency. It's going to mainly come from Sinn Fein.
Gavin Pepper's a different.
He's running up in Finglas. Malachy Steenson is running is the likely candidate in that area, or possibly a couple of others. I'll state for the record, I don't think Malachy Steenson is going to get elected, but I think he may well draw votes.
No, he'll definitely draw votes. I mean, there's somebody getting elected isn't always the only factor in you not getting elected, if you know what I mean. Like, it just damage you sufficiently that your first preference vote, your anti-establishment vote, is now knocked. I'd have to have a kind of a look at it, but like, she's lost a seat or not or failed to get elected in that constituency before, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But I'm not sure that she personally, with the public, is getting the blame for this as much as you might think. I think that there's a kind of especially in her own constituency, I'd be surprised if she lost her seat. But I think she'll take the blame for a national performance. And I mean, obviously the book ends with the leader and, you have to take responsibility for things or whatever. But I do think that, Sinn Fein has... the problem with Sinn Fein at the moment is that Sinn Fein has about 30 problems, not just one. They have a problem with flip-flopping on immigration. They have a problem with not being a strong opposition. They have a problem with not being a viable choice to vote for if you're annoyed or want to punish the government. They have a problem with candidates. They have a problem with polling. They have a problem with identity. They have so many problems. And now they have a Brian Stanley problem and, Niall O'Connell or whatever his name is, and more and more and more. So it's not just one problem. That's the issue. You can't get a PR company to come in and help you and say, we've got this one thing. Can you help us to manage the message and reduce damage limitation on this for an election? There's 30 problems. Like, who are Sinn Fein? Who do they stand for? Who's voting for them? Why would you vote for them? Like, I just think that at the end of the day, the people who are going to vote against this government and who are really, really angry for this government are going to break into two categories. And I think they're going to break into a nationalist, independent type vote, or they're going to break for a social democrat, something like that. And I don't think that there is any narrative or any momentum whatsoever around a story that someone is telling themselves as they walk down to the polling station. That is, I'm really angry with this government. I'm angry to the point we just made about restaurants closing and this, so I'm going to vote for Sinn Féin. I don't see the path to that story, and I think that's a huge problem for them. And that's why I think they're going back to base levels, 11-10% seat losses across the board.
So where do you think that vote is going then? Because this is a fundamental question. Like a year ago, the opinion polls had Sinn Fein on 35% in some cases.
Yeah.
I think there was one had them as high as 37%.
Yeah.
Those are voters who a year ago were feeling really annoyed with the government and wanted change.
Yeah.
Now, Sinn Fein, in the eyes of many voters, we know from both the local elections and from recent opinion polling, and indeed from chatting to people who've been canvassing for various parties on the ground, Sinn Fein appears to have disqualified themselves as the party of change.
Yeah.
Where are those votes going to go, Sarah? I think that might be the story of this election, because those votes, Fine Gael have gone up in the polls for certain. Fianna Fáil are kind of like getting a small lift as well. But I think that's coming from kind of middle of the road voters who might have been kind of like independent who are drifting back that way. But where's that people who were voting Sinn Féin a year ago? Where are they going to go? I mean, what's your sense of it, having watched elections? Because you mentioned their independents and the Social Democrats and Labour, but I mean, I just don't. I think that's the biggest question in this election, because I don't see, with the exception of Independent Ireland, in fairness, and to some degree, I don't really see anyone in a position to pick those votes up at the moment.
But I think that's kind of, if you reverse that backwards, that's part of the problem. You have the patient on the table. The patient is bleeding out. The problem is that the patient is bleeding from multiple wounds. So it's not that they're going to lose, that there is no, their vote isn't all going to Fianna Fáil or all going somewhere. It's bleeding all over the place. It's going to, on a constituency by constituency basis, if you actually look at the candidate breakdowns, it's going to, like, we were talking about Chris Andrews a couple of weeks ago. Let's say that, right? So Chris Andrews is a Sinn Féin TD for Dublin Bay South, right? So if I look at candidates there, Nick Delahanty is running. I think Nick Delahanty will take some Sinn Féin vote. I think some Sinn Féin vote will go back to Fianna Fáil. Jim O'Callaghan's kind of popular in the inner city. But I think that a Social Democrat will take... So if you look at the Sinn Féin vote in that particular constituency the last time, Chris Andrews was picking up votes in Ranelagh, in Rathmines, places like that, places where Sinn Féin wouldn't have been featuring at all. So I think that some of that will go to Labour, some of that will go to Social Democrat, some of that will, if it's, like on an issue by issue basis, if annoyed by immigration, if it's annoyed by this, it will go to different places. And that's part of the Sinn Féin problem, is that they're not losing vote share to one person, let's say Fianna Fáil, that they can attack. They're losing it to multiple locations. And that's why it's really hard to stem the bleeding, because it's just going everywhere. There's no clear place for it to go. But that's a symptom of the fact that, and I have said before, like, I would never be voting for Sinn Féin. I'm not a Sinn Féin voter. But as a person, as a voter, I'm pissed off with Sinn Féin that the main opposition party in this country, if you're the opposition, if you're the government for everyone, even the people who didn't vote for you. And if you're the main opposition, you're also the opposition for everybody, even the people who didn't vote for you. And they offered no opposition on anything that the government has done, pretty much. They were for the referendums. They joined in on the lying to the public about what those referendums were and weren't about. They've just toddled along for 2 years, as I've said before, measuring their offices for ministerial office and rubbing their hands together at every poll that had them on 37%. And they've done no opposition work. So, like, there's a lot of people who they've completely lost interest in Sinn Féin. They haven't done the job they're elected. So if I can't be trusting and the public can't trust Sinn Féin to do opposition right, why on earth would we trust them to do government right? Never mind their inability to even manage their own personal internal affairs when it comes to people texting 17-year-olds or whatever, all of the other stories. Never mind that. They can't even do opposition. So I think their problem is that for 2 or 3 years, particularly in opposition, they have allowed themselves to inflict, they've self-inflicted multiple wounds. So even the likes of me, like my profile, I would never vote Sinn Féin because I'm a political nerd and blah, 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 blah. But even the likes of me, who might have said, well, you know what? I'm actually going to vote for X, Y, and Z, but I'm going to give Sinn Féin a preference because they were the only party that gave any opposition in the referendum that tried to cancel me as a woman out of the Constitution. Yeah, but except they didn't. Nobody did. So they just dropped the ball on so many different things along the way that they're bleeding from multiple places, and they've lost votes in multiple places. They've lost transfers. They've lost, and that's why it's not recoverable, and that's why it's hard to pick where their vote is going, because it's going everywhere.
I couldn't say it any better. But I'm going to move on because we're talking about the election. I just wanted to mention the to get your opinion on, because we've had a spate in the last couple of weeks of what I call the high-profile independent entering the election. And as we were going to record this evening, news is breaking that Alan Shatter is going to wade into the fray in, I assume, Dublin Rathdown. That is his constituency. This is followed by an announcement at the weekend that Kate O'Connell is coming to save us all from ourselves. She's going to run as an independent in Dublin Bay South, which will at least provide great entertainment in what could be a boring election. I mean,
and also
Alan
there was
Shatter,
an article. There was an article about Kate the other day that you were giving out about. What was that again?
I can't remember. I think it was just the Sunday Independent were giving very detailed coverage to her kitchen. She already has a fantastic kitchen. She bakes bread. No, she cooks bread, is what they said. She doesn't bake it; she cooks it for her 3 children. And I just was like, what has this woman done? Does she have somebody's soul in the Sunday Independent, like hidden in one of those?
You said she had. I didn't read the article. You said the article said she has a giant oven.
Yes, a giant oven. She makes a lot of.
She needs somewhere to put the children after she finds them eating the outside of her house.
Sarah, that's very mean. That's very mean. I wouldn't have said that, and I certainly won't laugh at it until after we've stopped recording. But these people have no chance, I don't think. I mean, Alan Shatter, there are people who are going to say that I'm going to be nice to Alan Shatter because he agrees with me on one issue. He does agree with me on one particular issue. I also have to say, he's a very nice guy. I've met him once or twice, very nice guy. And I'll say this for him, when he was Minister for Justice, he's the only Minister for Justice who ever seriously tried to reform Sarah's cartel, the legal profession, and was beaten back on that. But I mean,
very strong legal mind, and he had good legal reform ideas. I've never met him, but I think he was a very smart guy, is.
But he also hasn't hope.
He
hasn't hope in this election. Let's be honest. Like, and
I don't think Kate O'Connell does either.
No, she doesn't. And it's funny to watch this sort of stuff happen as you get closer to elections. And I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago who was asking me if they should. This person, by the way, was male, because I had a conversation with a woman as well. So I'm not, anyway, the male person was asking me, but should I run in an election? And my answer was no, you absolutely should not. Because it was literally an idea that they had formed there and then. Maybe I should run in the election. I might get elected. And people have no idea how hard it is.
Yeah.
No idea how hard it is. This particular person wanted to run in a large rural constituency in the west of Ireland. And they were known in one time. And I was like, no, this is just not enough. Like, you need to do years of work to have a chance of taking a seat, which this person wanted to do. And Alan Shatter and Kate O'Connell have those advantages, but they still, I think, are going to struggle very much to get elected.
But it will add a bit of colour to the election, let's be honest. And from Alan Shatter's point of view, sometimes he's really strong. And again, I'm not getting into the issue that you agree with him on, because every time we do, we just get called Israeli shills, and I'm not, but whatever. But he is really strong on inheritance tax and a couple of legal things. He came forward. I think I remember he had some really interesting reform ideas about prenuptial agreements which aren't legally binding in Ireland and different things like that. Like, he's a good, strong legal mind. So sometimes people run and they don't get elected, but they introduce, issues onto the agenda. They get to talk about things that raise them in the public consciousness. So I don't think Alan Shatter, will running, whether he wins or not, will ever do anything but raise the bar of the quality of the political conversation in that constituency. And I think that is a good thing.
That is true. He is an intelligent and articulate Liberal, but he is also, and I want to put this on the record, he is also somebody who has been full square behind every single Liberal reform in this country for 30 or 40 years, and thus, to my mind, bears some responsibility for the society in which we now live, with all the attendant unhappiness and misery that is there. I mean, he was a Fine Gael TD. Yeah. He's had many good ideas. He's also had some terrible ideas, and he's been supportive of almost every terrible idea that the legislature has ever put forward. So I'm not that keen to see. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm in favour of intelligent and articulate liberals in the Dáil debating intelligent and articulate conservatives and intelligent and articulate libertarians and maybe even the odd communist. I don't care if they're intelligent and articulate. But we've got enough liberals in the Oireachtas without adding another one. I think I'd prefer some balance. Speaking of balance, let's talk a little bit, because there isn't an election yet and the Seanad is still sitting, and the hate crime bill was before the Seanad again this week because the government are intent on passing it before there is an election. Did you see Senator Sharon Keoghan standing up and listing 25 minutes worth of genders, and what did you make of that?
Well, I like Sharon Keoghan very much. I know her personally and I've met her, and I think that she is and people, I mean, I don't think it'll come as a screaming surprise that I agree with her that the 27 genders is nonsense. But you couldn't say anything but that she's a really good senator who really does her upper walia, does her work, picks her own personal agenda for her term and drives that agenda and drives the things that she wants to talk about like a motivated, hard-assed politician. I was struggling for a word there. So I think she's a really good senator, and I think that her reading it out, I mean, like, it went on and on and on, but that's kind of the point, John. Like, sometimes you have to
That is the point.
That you kind of have to show something up for how ludicrous it is. And I think she did that quite successfully.
I was listening to News Talk the other evening. I don't often listen to the car radio, but funny thing happened. I went for a drive into Limerick. I had an appointment, and I left my phone at home. So normally I would be like listening to stuff on my phone. I'd stick it on the car Bluetooth and be listening to a YouTube video or a podcast or something. But I didn't have it, so I was listening to Ciarán Cuddihy on News Talk, and he was interviewing Ronan Mullen and Barry Ward about the hate crime bill, and they were having this discussion about the gender element of it. And I sat there listening, and Barry Ward is a phenomenally skilled senior. He's now just been appointed, I believe, a senior counsel. A very skilled and articulate lawyer. Very formidable person to go up against. I've had one or two debates with him in the last year, and I'd say came out second best. He's very good. But I had to listen to him. I was like, it's testament to how good he was that I was sitting there wondering if he actually believed what he was saying.
I do too. I do too, because he's very smart and I like him, but I often wonder that, like, does he really believe this, or is he just so good at debating that he makes you think he does?
Because let me tell you, folks, if you were in any doubt, that there are certainly people in the Seanad who are true believers in this gender stuff. I mean, we could name a few of them. We won't. But there are also people who are going to vote for it who absolutely do not believe in it. And that's what drives me crazy, Sarah. I don't care if somebody really believes... On one level, I don't care if somebody really believes in something and they vote for it. Yeah. What really drives me crazy are all the people who don't believe in it and who vote for it. You cannot tell me... I'm sorry, and I hate to bring her up because I haven't spoken to the woman in years, genuinely. But Heather Humphreys is going to vote this week to enact into Irish law the fact that there are like multiple genders other than male or female. She does not believe that.
No.
She doesn't believe it. No. Like, I'm sorry, I challenge her to come on this podcast or any platform and say that she believes it. Talk about how she's concerned about the rights of demi-gender people. Go on, do it, Heather. Because you don't believe it. And that, I think, is the most depressing and, on some level, sinister thing about this. Because half the people in the Seanad agree with Ronan Mullen and don't agree with Barry Ward, but are going to vote with Barry Ward. And I wonder why it is that they're so afraid of voting the other way. It can't. Obviously, the party whip culture is something to do with it, but it can't just be that, can it?
No, it's not just that. It's because they're afraid of the heat that they'll get for being a transphobe or a bigot or, all of the names. I mean, just go online and look at the abuse that people get for asking questions. Look at the amount of, lecturers, female lecturers too in the UK that I can think of off the top of my head who've been run out of their jobs for saying that there was, there shouldn't be men in women's spaces or whatever it is. Like there's a body there that destroys people if they come out against this, and politicians just don't want the hassle.
But what I find really sinister about this, and I'm going to use the word sinister because I think it is sinister, is that, correct me if I'm wrong, because this is just my observation, and maybe I've missed something, but I never hear those people, the true believers in 600 genders, on the radio explaining their views. I never hear somebody going on to RTE to say, well, actually, I think Ronan Mullen is wrong. I think we should recognise 76 genders. I think it's very clear that, football gender is a real gender. And here's why I think that is. And here's why I think people who are of that gender are discriminated against. That doesn't happen. They are so powerful in our society that they actually don't feel the need to justify themselves to the rest of us. Whereas the rest of us have to justify ourselves to them if we dare to disagree. That's what I find so deeply sinister about the whole thing. And that's why I question, are people, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not saying there's a conspiracy theory. I'm not saying there's somebody in the shadows pulling strings. I am saying there seem to be a lot of TDs who are afraid of crossing this particular group of people. And I don't know why that is. Because those particular group of people don't even have the confidence to go on the airways and defend the views that they want you to vote for.
But have you not had conversations? Have you not had conversations? I mean, we know, and everybody listening to this podcast knows that we have friends in multiple parties that we talk to from time to time, socially or whatever. And like I've said to people that I know who are politicians, do you think that there's multiple genders? Do you think that what is a woman or whatever? And apart from one, I have yet to meet one who didn't say, yeah, no, I agree with you. I'm not going to go there. Every single one of them is like, of course you're right. Of course this is garbage. They all know it's garbage.
And maybe they're all just plum-mossing us. Maybe they're all just like, Sarah Ryan, she really cares about the old genders. I'll just tell her what she thinks.
Well,
and secretly behind the scenes, they're kind of like,
that's possible as well. But I also think that if you just talk to normal people day to day, like that, most people agree with me as well. Now they're not all plum-mossing me. I've the way you be going around through your day to day life, and you might kind of have a conversation with something, particularly in the last year and a half. I think people get a bit more confident, and they, people would say, well, I don't want my kids to be taught that, or I don't agree with that, or whatever. They're much more confident now to say it. So it's not like the politicians are actually, funnily enough, in line with the public, and that I think the majority of the public don't want this. Nobody wants anybody to be cruel to anybody or, demean them or, whatever. But if you're a politician right now about to vote that bill in, when you put your head down on your pillow at night and you're thinking about your day and you're thinking about, the work you're doing and the whatever you're talking about in the Dáil or the Seanad or whatever, do you really honestly think that there's 28 genders? I'll never believe it. I'll never believe it that you do.
I've been trying to think like how you talk yourself into that as a politician, and I think the way you talk yourself into it is by telling yourself a story like, well, look, we're just bringing Irish law in line with European norms, which I think is the line that I heard somebody say this week. That kind of like, the European Union, we need to be in line with other European Union countries on hate speech legislation, right? Which is a kind of horseshit thing, but I think it's what they convince themselves. By the way, before we move on, Senator Eileen Flynn. Now, Senator Eileen Flynn is an interesting person. She's a Taoiseach's appointee. She's been appointed for the very noble purpose of representing the traveller community, which has long been underrepresented in the Oireachtas. She's an independent. She is appointed by Leo Varadkar at the Seanad, but she's not a Fine Gaeler. But she's absolutely up to her neck in all this stuff. Loves a bit of hate speech, loves a bit of hate crime, and she had an amendment to the legislation this week, Sarah. Because obviously there are criminal penalties for the hate crime. So if I batter you over the head, because I want that lovely necklace you're wearing, I go to jail for 6 weeks. But if I batter you over the head because I want the lovely necklace and also you're a stupid woman and I don't like women, then I get an extra sentence on top of that. That's the aggravated factor, misogyny in that case. Senator Eileen Flynn wants there to be an additional penalty on top of that, which is re-education, that I should have to go to a camp for a few weeks and be re-educated out of my hate, which I just thought was fascinating, that we now have a politician literally calling for re-education of political thought criminals.
But also, what I find interesting about that is that when you're saying, for example, if you say to me, um, you're a stupid woman or whatever, that it can be determined to be a hate crime because I'm a protected class as a woman. But are we suggesting then that every crime against everybody in Ireland except for white men has an additional element to it?
Sometimes feels that way, gotta tell you. But what I know, I'm a privileged member of the oppressing classes. Let's move on because we're short in time, and I want to talk about this case. Move off politics because what I think is more, people should know that when we talk about cases before the courts, we're restricted in what we can say. And this is an active case before the Gardaí. There's an investigation ongoing, but it's been reported in the news. This child, Kyron Durnan, and the Gardaí have upgraded the missing persons investigation that was opened at the end of August to a murder investigation. And Sarah, they're now saying that this child, who's 8 years old, in the Journal this evening, the Journal.ie, are reporting in a story byline by Christine Bohan and others that the child may not have been alive, Gardaí think, for the last 2 years. And there's no record of this 8-year-old child ever having been in school. We're not going to say anything more about that or talk about anything else because we don't want to take the risk of prejudicing the case or anyone involved. But just those two apparent factoids, the child may have been dead for a couple of years and the child may not have been in school. I mean, if that is true, is this not one of the biggest scandals in recent years to have afflicted this state?
Well, I mean, obviously this is just so horrendous. I mean, how I mean, maybe I'm naive, but I mean, there's just so many interactions that my children have with the state from birth to, you know, GPs, like district nurses when they're babies, school, like all of these different things. But the idea that a child could just vanish and nobody notice is very strange. I mean, I know people who've had interactions with Tusla because of really like pathetically minor things or whatever. So how a child could just go missing like that is if this is the truth and if this is what has happened, that a child has managed to be missing like that for 2 years and is now presumed dead, there's going to be serious questions that need to be asked about how that system and there's been cases in the UK that have been massive turning points for the way the UK has interacted with children that were maybe in danger or missing or whatever. So I think that if that's what's happened here, there's going to have to be a serious investigation into how a child can be gone for 2 years. And how is he never in school?
Well,
I mean, I have an
he's not
8-year-old.
the only
He's
one.
been in school for 3 years.
I mean, look, a couple of years ago, we had, I've lost track of time. It might have been a decade ago. When did we have the children's rights referendum? Fair while ago.
Yeah, it's ages ago.
It predated the even the equal marriage referendum, I think.
Yeah.
We had that children's rights referendum, and I remember being lectured about like how essential it was for children's rights. And this is a state in which Tusla, we have reports from Tusla of children in the care of Tusla, mainly female children with some males, actively being groomed by grooming gangs for sexual purposes. We have reports of children going missing from state care. Now, obviously, some of those missing cases are less serious than others. Some of them are people going off with their parents, being formally absent but not necessarily missing. But nonetheless, there are a lot of reports of that sort of stuff, some of which are concerning. And now we have this case of an Irish child who apparently nobody's seen for a number of years and the state didn't even notice. If what the reports are true. I mean, like Roderic O'Gorman at some point has to answer some questions on this. He is the Minister for Children as well as being the leader of the Green Party. And I'm not raising that to make a political anti-Green point. It's just a statement of fact. This is your area. It's astonishing to me that the actual figures on child abuse and all that sort of stuff are not more of an issue for him than they are. Why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, he's only got about 3 more weeks left as his job, so maybe he's busying himself with other things. But I think, what I think is that like there's politicians who are kind of they're protected by the media. you know, and I know that this, as you say, would have been a massive scandal years ago. It would have been a huge, huge, huge story, and there would have been consequence or somebody, you know. And obviously, you're the minister. Like it's, you know, you're not capable of managing or being responsible for every single thing that happens all the way down. But you know, the history books are full of ministers who've fallen on a sword for things that were at a department or lower level that they couldn't have possibly been responsible, but they had to take responsibility for. And at the very least, he could answer some questions. But
I think he gets an easy time of it because
of
he's
course he
gay.
does. Really?
I just got to, I do. I think that, I don't know why I feel kind of like, oh my God, I've just made a big dramatic statement. Well, this is a statement of fact. He gets an easy time of it because he's gay. And I think he gets a particular easy time of it because there is discomfort both in the political class and in the media class from asking a gay man about child welfare in a critical way. I think there is a discomfort there about, oh, I definitely think so. Maybe I'm wrong. Just because I think something doesn't mean I'm right, but I definitely think it. Like, put it this way, I think that if Roderic O'Gorman was a married straight man with kids of his own, that the questions he will be being asked about child welfare would be harder and harsher. And I think that there is no doubt in many instances well-intended degree to which his very public sexuality insulates him, because in part there are people on the right. I'm not amongst them, but there are people on the right who do the opposite, who link him to, or basically say that his sexuality is a reason for his neglect of these children, which is not true. I don't think that's true for a second. But I think he gets an easy time of it by virtue of being a gay man who the media want to shy away from criticizing anything to do with kids and sexual abuse. That's what I think. Shoot me if you think I'm wrong, but I think
I don't
it's
think that's
the
it. I
case.
think it's just, I think that it is that he isn't particularly competent. And I think that he is obviously has a,
No, I don't think he's competent either. But I'm saying, why doesn't he get more criticism? Like, the media aren't shielding him because he's incompetent.
no, but I think that he has a
They don't.
relationship with the media that's quite cozy. And I think that, you know, the media are, you know, they're just, I mean, they obviously like him or they're friendlier to him. I don't really know. I don't agree that it's, I've never even thought about it that it, like it could be because he's gay. I just think it's because he is, seems to have always gotten an easy ride. There's other politicians that I can think of who get an easy ride from the media who aren't gay. Holly Cairns is one of them. Holly Cairns gets an easy ride from the media. I mean, I know
Yeah,
she's
but
not in the
Holly Cairns is
ministry.
not a minister.
I know that, but I'm saying that even when, you know, she might have been criticised more heavily on things, she hasn't been. And I think that there's just people who, you know, for whatever reason, get easier rides than others. And usually, if you look at it, it's not whether or not they're gay or not. It's whether they have the right opinions about the right things. And I think he falls into that
I mean,
category.
there's a fair point there. I mean, look, Holly Cairns and Ivana Bacik both get an easy ride from the media, but that is
Yeah.
because journalists love them and want to be him, because they're like right on liberal women, which is like the highest, best thing you can be in a modern Western society, is the right on educated liberal white woman who tells the rest of us what's wrong with us. So they love them.
Mm.
Um, I mean, I Helen McEntee to some extent I think gets an
Yeah.
easy-ish ride from the media, to be fair. But I mean, most cabinet ministers do. But I think this one particularly stands out for me, because it's not so much that they give him an easy ride, as in they cover the issues and they're like, oh, they won't go too hard and Roderic. It's that there's almost a shying away from talking about the fact that there are issues. Like, it has been widely reported. Gript has reported on a number of occasions, that we weren't making it up, that there is concern in the Gardaí and in Tusla that children in Tusla are being groomed for sex by gangs of adult males. There's no implication there about the migration status of those adult males, in case people think that's what it is. There's no implication about anything else. Just there are gangs of adult males who may be grooming children, and that most of the media won't touch it. Won't touch it, presumably because they're either sympathetic to Roderic O'Gorman, or they're afraid that people will draw assumptions about immigration, and that's bad too. So I don't know. But there's something amiss, I think. We're running out of time, but let's talk quickly about Liam Payne, who died today, the One Direction guy, because I'm sure there's some One Direction fans who
I know.
Or former One Direction fans. Are you a former One Direction fan? Are you that?
I'm a bit old for One Direction, although I'm the same age as Cheryl Cole, and Cheryl Cole went outwardly in pain, so maybe I'm not a bit old for One Direction. I think that I couldn't even name a One Direction song, but I think any woman who's listening will understand what I mean now when I say that Cheryl Cole is obviously a very famous person, and Cheryl Cole was pregnant with their son, Liam Payne, and herself have a son at the same time that I was pregnant with my first son. So there's about 3 months between my oldest son and her son. And so the minute I saw it, I just kept thinking about what a horror show it must be for her to wake up this morning and have to tell her son that his dad is dead. And that's the thing that sticks with me. I think that 8 for boys is a real age where they idolise their dads. And it's just absolutely horrendous. And I think that once again, we're in a situation where, this is obviously a person who is struggling. And, we don't fully know what's happened yet, but it looks like somebody who, he says himself, I saw lots of videos of him being interviewed, that he struggled with, drugs and alcohol and mental health issues. And it's another case of somebody who got very famous very fast, very young. And it just seems to be a recipe for disaster a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. It does. I don't really have much to add on it, except to say that, I saw that he had gotten criticism on social media in recent days for dancing at a concert that one of his I think Niall Horan, the Irish guy, was giving a concert in Argentina. He was there, he got. And he'd gotten, wasn't there, didn't you tell me, an ex-girlfriend who was making complaints about him or something like that? Yeah. It's very, I think people who aren't, I mean, I am not going to compare for a second the work I do to being a global pop superstar. But when you're in the public eye, even to the extent that you and I are, with the people who listen and watch us every week, and last week I invented the name of a movie on this podcast, which was like a bad moment or funny moment. And I was and I felt it for a few days afterwards. It wasn't that I did anything wrong. And I never said it was funny. But you do, to some extent, every mistake you make is lived out in the public eye on a very small scale doing the job that I do. When you're a global superstar, every single thing that you do wrong in your life becomes news. I don't know how people cope with it, especially when it involves thousands and thousands of screaming fans and people willing to print all sorts of stuff just to get a few quid off you. So I'm not going to condemn the guy. It just seems really, really tragic.
Yeah, it does. 31 years of age is no age. And, for his family and everything, it's just horrific.
Some quick programming notes before we leave you. I am recording this podcast on Thursday night. I have a ridiculously early flight in the morning on Friday.
So you're in a Fowler.
London for the weekend.
Tell the truth.
I'm in a Fowler. Yeah, I hate early flights. But I have an early flight to London tomorrow because Fatima and I, if you wish to meet us and see us, are partaking in the Battle of Ideas Festival, Battlefest 24, in London over the weekend. That should be fun. If you are based in London and you're nothing else to be at, come along and say hello to us. We'd be glad to see you there. Also, Sarah and I have been tossing around ideas about how we can expand this podcast during the election, maybe do a couple of half-hour shows a week, something like that. If you're interested in two randomers nerding it out over the election, that is something we're considering doing.
And also we'll do predictions, and people love when we're, well, I'm never wrong, but you are wrong with your predictions. They love it.
Yeah, well, I've started this. They're behind the paywall on Gript. I'm going to do a written prediction of all 43 constituencies, and I mean, I guarantee. And I started sitting there. I was doing Clare the other day, and one of the TDs actually subscribed to Gript clearly to see the prediction. That was very funny. And I was thinking to myself, God, I could be so wrong on this. But they're behind the paywall, so I'm not telling you what they are on the podcast. If you're interested, go read them there.
Look, I'm joking. I'm wrong all the time, but we'll have a bit of crack with it.
We will. So that'll be coming up. And we are hopeful of, on Count Day, we may even do a live broadcast, Sarah, from the county centre, and who knows, some politicians might come and talk to us. The ones who've lost their seats anyway and aren't worried about being unpopular anymore, they might come and talk to us.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. All right. But until next week, I think we'll leave it there. So from Sarah and from me, it's been another edition of The Week That Really Was. I've been John. She's been Sarah. You've been great for watching. Talk soon.